Okay, today's guest, Robert Lindsay Milne, was reading tea leaves before he could speak English. The Toronto native had humble beginnings as a 19-year-old hippie psychic working at a tea house, but he has since grew to be recognized across the continent as one of the most insightful psychic intuitive counselors of his time. You'll be fascinated by his work, specifically with the work he did with a coma patient and how he was able to help cure a very rare disease, as featured in his book, The Perfect Predator. Let's welcome today's guest, Robert Lindsay Milne.
Thank you very much. I was really excited when I found out I was going to be on with you, and and after our short conversation, I'm even more excited. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's very inspiring for me, for a person myself who has been interested in psychic work and trying to deal with things that are not with the unseen, and having the energy of feeling things as opposed to always thinking about things and seeing things on the surface. Yeah. I was drawn to your work and to your capabilities and the expertise you have in this field. And I just wanted to, maybe you can just share a little bit with the audience on how you began this
Thank
career.
you. Oh, and one other thing, last January 17th, I celebrated 57 years of being a professional psychic. And in that time, 57 years, man. And in that time, I've done more than 100,000 psychic connections. Oh, it's just mind-boggling when I did the numbers a few years ago, actually about 15 years ago. So it's what I've been my whole life. When I was a child, like 5, 6 years old, I knew things. And I was born in the first part of the last century. So I was born in 1949, and the world was very different then. And I came home from school for lunch. It was either kindergarten or grade 1. And I said to my mother, Grandma Harris died today. And my mother got very upset and yelled at me and hit me for saying bad things. Grandma Harris actually was my great-grandmother, and I'd only seen her once in my life, and she lived in London, England, and I was in Canada. So the thought, the chances of a 5-year-old or 6-year-old coming up with something like that is really unusual. So anyway, I got hit for saying that. The next night at dinner, in those days, time or news traveled very slowly. You almost never made long distance phones in 1955 across the ocean. At dinner the next night, we're sitting at the table, my mother, my father, my sister, and I. And my mother says to my dad, Grandma Harris died yesterday. I thought my dad was going to get angry with my mother and punish her in some way for saying bad things. And to my astonishment, they talked about it.
Wow.
As if, and now I was 5. Now that was very perplexing. And a lot of things, and I used to get into trouble. Uncle Harold, that wasn't Aunt Sally. Who was that person? Now that one got me hit for sure. But I was just seeing, and I didn't know. So now flip forward to about 9 years old. And it was right around this time in 1957, actually. My dad took me to Toronto Maple Leafs Stanley Cup hockey game, semifinal. Boston and Toronto was playing. Harry Lumley, by the way, was the goalie for Boston in those days, and they had the uke line, the uke line. And anyway, Boston, Toronto were playing in the semifinal. The series tied 1-1, and the third game is tied 1-1 at the end of the third period. Teams go off the ice for a rest for the first overtime period. So this was at Maple Leaf Gardens in Toronto. And again, I was 9. So then the teams come on the ice, just stretch a little bit for the first overtime period. I knew number 17 with Toronto, Gary Eman. I knew he was going to win. I knew he was going to score. Now, the game hadn't started.
Right.
But I knew that he scored. You see, it went from he's going to score to he scored. But the reality of what was going on in front of me was different than what I knew it was going to be. Now, that was very confusing then. It took me another 25 years to understand what that was, what was going on in my head. Is pretty advanced, what was going on in my head. So anyway, so imagine this building, Maple Leaf Gardens. They turn the lights down, getting ready to start the first overtime period, and the lights are on the arena. The whole building is completely silenced. And just as the referee, by the way, Gary Eamon wasn't on the ice. He was like a mediocre player. He wasn't like a star. He was a good player, but so he wasn't a first stringer. So as the referee is just about to drop the puck, I couldn't hold it in anymore. And I just jumped up and started screaming. The game hadn't started yet. And the entire building, 18,000 people, turned and looked at me and my dad. And he put his hand on my shoulder and he just said, "Sit down." And I did. Referee drops the puck, the game starts, and I start looking around thinking, nobody knew. But Heeman hadn't even scored yet, and nobody knew. That was what I was thinking. And then Eamon jumps over the boards and he skates towards the net. And a guy named Red Kelly passes the puck to him, and Eamon tips the puck into the net. The building just erupts. And I look around and everybody's yelling and screaming. And the old flashlights, the photo, all the lights are going off in the buildings. Everyone's yelling and screaming. And I was just looking around saying, nobody knew. And that's when I knew I was seeing things differently than others. Now, that's me at 72 explaining what I was understanding or what I had realized at 9 or 10. And I really didn't know very much. I just knew that I was seeing things and other people weren't seeing them. And I didn't get into trouble nearly as much after that. But I also knew this is what I was going to do.
Did your father bring up a conversation about this particular subject on the way
On
home?
my father's deathbed last August, he refuted my psychic ability. Now, I never ever told him. But so remember, I was 9.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So I didn't have a lot of knowledge in the world, and I didn't know anybody that was like me. And I wasn't understanding what I was doing. I would not do today what I did when I was 9. I like your dog, 9 or 10. I got 3, but I think mine are a little bigger though. My sister and I used to get 25 cents for an allowance. And for 25 cents each, we would go to it was called the Fox Theater. And for 25 cents, you'd get a box of popcorn, a drink, and candies, 2 full-length feature movies, about 4 cartoons, all for $0.25.
Right.
So that day, and by the way, the Maple Leafs game was on a Thursday night. Saturday night, Boston and Toronto were playing again, and Gail and I go to get our allowance. And my dad hands me my allowance, and I say, "Boston's going to win tonight." He says, "No way." And I said, "I bet you $0.25." He takes my quarter back. We couldn't go to the theater that day. Yeah, but that night I had 50 cents. And I hustled my dad for several years. I got so good at it, I thought I had to let him win, because he would have figured it out. And he never figured it out. As I got older, I realized that was from my values, using my awareness in an immoral way.
So did you come from a religious home where it was
No.
shunned? No.
No, no. My family just rejected it. It was just, as much as they rejected religion.
Now, in terms of like your friends or sharing any of the information or the insight that you had, were you able to talk to anybody outside of the family, like to communicate your abilities?
Not at that time. And while going to school, in public school, in grade school, I would often see my friends in the schoolyard going through difficulties, and they would either be drawn to me, or I would be drawn to them. And there were times where I'd go up to a teacher and say, Mr. Matthews, the problem you had with your house is going to be okay next week. Mr. Matthews looks at me and thinks, how the hell does this kid know there's something wrong with my house? And then a week later, he said, how did you know? He came to me and he said, how do you know it was going to get fixed? Or I would say things to teachers that would affect them, something going now. Remember, I'd be saying it to them as a 12-year-old. Okay, but I would speak to them and they would know I was talking about something personal in their life. They'd come back and ask me, and I've just always done that. And when my hockey world was over, and it was, at the time, it was the greatest tragedy of my life. And I was so convinced that, and by the way, I came from a very abusive background, both physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. It was a very bad background. I ran away from home the first time when I was 14. And from 14 and a half, that's when I first left. It was November of the year, and I lived in the streets in downtown Toronto from November to the end of April, and I survived on the streets, homeless, using my intuition, my psychic ability, and my psychic ability was honed in survival on the street. At around April of that year, the police caught me. I was a minor. And they took me home, and I came home. It was in April of whatever that year was, and I stayed at home until the following autumn, just after, again, about 1 year after the first time I left. And at age 15 and a half, I left my family, and I never lived full time with my family ever again. Wow. And on the street at 15, I was surviving using my skills. And in that time, when I would get into trouble, and children get into trouble on the street, I always had an option of being able to use my psychic ability, my intuition, to solve the problem, or an illegal or an immoral act. And almost always I chose using the intuitive psychic way. There was no right or wrong choice. It was, though, what choices I made determined which way my life would go. For example, until I was about 52, I had never gone into a store or any place like that, never stolen anything. Meanwhile, I was on the street with no food, but never stole. I just didn't do it. But by the way, at about 53, I realized I had never stolen anything, and I thought, I wonder what that feels like. So I went and stole something out of the store just because I wanted to know, right? I went back the next day and paid for it, but I just wanted to know the experience because I had been so strict with that. So I never stole anything. I did have to do some immoral things as a child, but mostly I followed my psychic ability and my intuition, and that's what got me through this. I heard that if you worked at the Cozy Tea Room in Toronto, and you had to do tea leaf readings and card readings, if you worked at the Cozy Tea Room in Toronto, You work in there in the afternoon, you'd get a cup of tea, a sandwich, and cookies, and you'd get paid at the end of the shift. And if you worked in the evening, you would get a hot meal sandwich, or sorry, hot meal, cup of tea, and cookies, and you'd get paid. And on January 17th, 1965, I applied to be a reader at the Cozy Tea Room. I was 15 and a half, and I had to do a reading for the owner of the place. And I'd never done tea leaf readings in my life. And I had no idea how to do a card reading. So what I did is I just simply picked the tea cup up like this, right? And I pretended I was looking in the teacup, and then I just held it like this. And I just looked at Mrs. Cox, as I always did, and I just talked about what I knew about her. And then when I'd done that enough, then I put the cards on the table. I had no idea what the hell the 7 of hearts meant or the 2 of diamonds. I was, you know, I was a pretty smooth operator as a kid. That's how I survived too. So I would say, okay, well, this situation is going to happen, and it shows me by the 6 and the 12, or the 6 and the 2 here, and I would combine the cards in what I was actually saying when the cards had no meaning. They were just a prompt, and I got hired that day. And that day I worked in the afternoon, and I got a sandwich and a cup of tea, and I did the night shift, and I got a hot dinner. It had been weeks. And that night I got paid for 2 shifts. I had a warm place to sleep, and the next day I had a job. And I worked at the Cozy Tea Room from the time I was about 15 and a half till about 21.
Wow.
And I worked 4 days a week, 5 days a week, sometimes 6 and sometimes 7. And some days I'd see 40 people, sometimes I'd see 10. And it would happen every day, one after the other, after the other, after the other. And by the time I was 21 or something, I was, you know, I had my 10,000 hours, you know.
Yeah, it's fascinating because it seems to me that you could have played the role of the victim in the situation that you were placed upon, but it seems that you took advantage to the best of your ability to, I guess, enhance or find your soul's path in doing what you were meant to do.
Well, that's certainly a glossy way to look at it. The reality of it, Adam, was I left home because I didn't believe I was worthy enough to live there, that I had failed at being a hockey player, even though it wasn't my fault. And incidentally, the heartache with that is that my father convinced me that was the only chance I would ever have of making a success in life, was to play in the NHL. And he got into an argument with the league that I was with. And by the way, I had tried out with the Toronto Marlies and made the team. And the league I was playing with wanted to negotiate. And anyway, my dad got into a big fight, and I never played hockey again. My dad never showed love to me again. And I spent my years on the street proving that I was worthy enough to be loved. It had no other spiritual thing, and that was what it was. And it was, and that's one of the things that kept me on the straight and narrow, because I've never been arrested. I never committed a crime ever. So it was just proving that I was worthy to be in the family. Yeah. I never proved it.
Yeah. As you were doing readings, or as you said prior to, yes, when you went to the hockey, yes, game,
yeah,
would you say that the timeline of a person doing a reading is seeing things that already had happened in order to bring it to the present moment? In other words, you're in the present moment, but then seeing something that takes place that didn't take place already had to have almost maybe happened. I've always kind of been a little bit perplexed with doing readings and understanding and listening to someone like yourself speak about it.
Oh, okay. That's a great question. So as a kid, I just did it. So now, 57 years later, when I'm doing a reading, when I look at somebody and I see their life from conception to completion. I see the whole thing. Now, when I say I see it, I'm aware of the energy line. So I am aware of where they started, how the energy was when they were born, and I'm aware of where they are and pretty clear on how many years in front of them that they're going to have. And in that reading, I go forward and backward in time several times in the session.
Right.
And you know, I do 3 or 4 readings a day. So I go forward and backward in time 80 years, 3 or 4 times each session. So sometimes I don't know what year I'm in, or sometimes I get mixed up by the month or the day. So when I'm doing a reading, the things I want to know about somebody is, how old are you now? What month is your next birthday? That's it. So now I know where you are in time, where you know, and when you're, and as like you know, a fine tune, I know what month your next birthday is. And when I do that, that's how I connect with you. And I'm seeing things that are happening or could happen at the same time. What I have to. So you asked me an interesting question, and I'm just putting it together in my head.
Yes.
So
yes.
when I'm doing a reading, what I'm saying most of the time isn't what I'm thinking. What I'm saying has, oh, you know, right. What I'm saying has already been processed. Okay, that's coming out. Now I also am thinking about what I'm going to say, what I also have said, and then I'll be thinking about where I'm going to be taking the reading. And then I might even be thinking at the same time what I'm going to be doing later in the day. So if you visualize, now it's around 5 TV screens on the wall. It started with 2, but now there's, like, imagine 5 TV screens, each one playing a different channel. And I'm looking at the channels as I'm doing the reading. So that's one of the reasons I say to people, don't interrupt me. Because if you interrupt me, it's like disconnecting from the internet, and it pisses me off. And you know, because sometimes you don't get it. You can't reconnect. Sometimes it gets lost. And at minimum, it takes a lot of energy to get it back. It also might have to do with me, you know, being 72 as well. But and so, you know, that's what it's been like after 57 years of doing this.
That's very interesting.
And I thought I never realized it was as unique or different than what other people do until I started going on podcasts like this with you and me. And
it's funny when you talk about certain subjects. It's understandable, because when you know something, you think everyone knows it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what subject it is.
Yeah. Or you don't think anything about it and get surprised when people don't know.
Yeah. How did when you do receive information, is it through audio? Is it through visual, or is it a holographic images, or is it voices or a download that's sent to you? And how does the information come through?
A lot of times I just know. And what I do is I start talking. And I start every reading the same way. I start off with the date. I say my client's name. So, you know what, this is Monday, March the 7th, 2022, psychic reading for Adam Gell by Robert Lindsy Milne via Zoom video in Toronto. Then I say, just before I start to do your reading, I'm going to explain the process. I'll start off talking about the future, maybe not, and I might change that. Then I'll come back and talk about the present. If it's appropriate, we'll deal a little with the past, back to the present, and into the future again. And after that, there's a question period where you can ask anything you wish. And then here we are today in March. of 2022. What I'm going to be discussing with you today is, okay, and that's how every reading starts, except for the dates, of course, are changed in the name.
Have the messages become clearer over time, or were they clearer at
I
one point?
see things. If there were ever a time I was going to get a reading from me, right now. Right now is the time. Now, I can't do it as much or as fast. There was a time in my early career, like when I was in my mid-20s, I started touring across Canada, appearing on radio and TV shows, then the US, then Europe, and almost around the whole English-speaking world. The only places I haven't been is Australia and New Zealand to perform, do psychic readings. And so I'm trying to remember what I was thinking about that. So in those days, I would travel with a secretary. I was young, so I used to do 10 30-minute readings in a row, take a 1 hour break, and then do 10 more 30-minute readings. And then I'd go out partying, and the next day I'd do it like that. And on the road, I would just do that every day. It was just the way it was. And then as I got a bit older, as I got closer to into my 30s, I could do it, but it would really, I'd be tired. So I cut it back. Instead of doing 10 in a row and a half-hour readings, I then did 4 in a row, and then took a break, and then 4 in a row, and then 4 in a row, and then 4 in a row. I did it like that. So I went from 20 to 16. Then I went down from 16 down to 14, and then down to 12. And then I started adding time onto appointments. And then again doing less. And now I put aside a lot of time, and I see things broader, deeper, clearer, farther, and better than at any other time. I see things on levels I never knew imagined. I never imagined. I do things that I never imagined I would do. And that's why I say right now. So I just can't do it as fast or as much, but what you get now is, instead of going to a buffet, what you get now is a gourmet dinner,
How would you describe what do the readings do for you personally? On a personal level, do they give you?
Yeah, what a great question. Doing readings is my purpose of being alive. Now, it's not just readings, Adam. Now, that's one of the things that I do, but I'm almost always seeing people in my personal life that are in trouble and helping them in that moment, and then going on to something else. Seeing somebody trip and fall. It just so happens I'm there and I help them up. See somebody just about get hit by a subway train and I save their life, or get led to do it. Things like that happen all the time. Right. And other things that I've learned to do is to manipulate energy. And other things that I've learned, and I'm really psychic and intuitive, and my instincts are behavioral. So I'm really interested in human behavior and how we think and why we think the way we do, and how to make our thinking different. And I'm really big into that. Yeah. And I suppose if I wasn't going to be a psychic and I didn't learn to read and write until I was in about 18, 19 years old. And I still have a document that says I'm functionally illiterate. I just had, so if I would have been able to read and write clearly or better, I probably would have been a psychologist or, something like that, because I'm really tuned into those types of healings. So I do life coaching. And since I'd been working at the tea room for about 6 months or a year. And then I started doing therapy. And it wasn't until like 2 months ago, I graduated from all my therapy. Up until 2 months ago, there has never been a time where I wasn't doing some type of inner work or healing on myself. I graduated a couple, just a little while ago. I don't do therapy anymore. I don't need it. I'm fixed. I'm cured, you know?
Yeah.
So I get motivated by that. But I also, I go back to the neighborhoods or the neighborhood where I lived on the streets, and I go and talk to the street kids, and I give them money. I give them money and talk to them.
You're inside.
Yeah, no, actually, what I do, the insight is so I make it a ritual when I give up my coins, right? So I make it a ritual. I have this little money altar, and it's got a fountain on it, and a crystal dish, and every time I go out and spend bills, I never, whatever change I get, I never spend it. And sometimes I ask for extra change. And when I come home, I put the coins in the crystal dish, and I say, thank you for the energy I am about to receive. So when the dish gets full, I put the coins in a plastic bag, and I wait till I get about 3 or 4 or 5, and there's anywhere from $30 to $40 in each plastic bag. And then I go back to the neighborhood I used to be on the streets, and I walk around looking for people to give the money to, and I talk to them, and I play with them in a really respectful and fun way. I'll tell you one of my favorite stories. There was this one night, right at the corner of where I used to hang out, like over 50 years ago, there's a hot dog stand, and the same family own it today. And when I was on the street, I would have money. And incidentally, I never begged either, by the way. I would buy a hot dog from, the great grandfather or the grandfather of the guy that's, doing cooking hot dogs today. And this one night I was there, and I'd finished giving out. No, I had one box of coins left, or one bag left, and I bought a hot dog, and while he was cooking it, I was standing against the wall. I'm a street kid, so I was, and I looked down the street, and I saw the dirtiest looking kid I've ever seen. Now, I was in my late 60s, so when I say a kid, he could have been in his 20s. But he was one of the dirtiest looking people I'd ever seen. And he came up to me, and he said, can you spare a dollar? And I said, $1? What do you want it for? And he said, do you really want me to tell you the truth? And I said, no, lie to me. Of course I want you to tell me the truth. What do you want the dollar for? And he said, are you sure? And I said, well, you're getting farther away from the dollar. What do you want it for? Right. And he said, I want to buy some drugs. And I said, for $1? Who's your dealer? What do you, $1? He said, well, that's a start. And I said, then what kind of drugs do you want? And he said, I'd like to buy marijuana. And I said, for $1, eh? Okay. And I reached in my pocket, and I pulled out one of my $40 bags of coins. And I said, and I handed the coins to him. And he looked at it, and he was astonished. And he then said, are you looking for a date? And I said, no, man, no. He said, oh. He said, then why did you give this to me? And I said, because you're worth it. And he got really choked up.
Yeah.
And then he went to hug me. I went, no, man, I got this issue about being touched. It's okay. You just accept it. And he said, thank you. And as he was walking away, I said to him, hey, wait a minute, come here. I can do a little bit better. And I pulled a joint out of my pocket and gave it to him. Now, cannabis is legal in Canada, right? So I pulled a joint out of my pocket and handed it to the kid and said, here you go, and he walked away. And that's part of my routine.
Yeah.
Another time, I was walking by a guy and he's sitting there with a empty coffee cup in front of him, sitting on the ground. And as I'm walking by, I walk by and then look to the side and then back up a bit. And I say to him, excuse me, sir, is that your cup? And he says, yeah, what about it? And I said, well, what do you use it for? And he said, to put money in. And I looked in the cup and I said, there isn't any money in it. You're not having a good day. And he said, I'm not having a very good day. Right. And I said, let me have you get a better day. And I handed him my bag of coins. And the look on his face was astonishment. And I started to walk away and I just turned and looked back. And there was this guy looking at the coins and I just laughed my ass off all the way down the street because the guy got the day off.
It's so fascinating. It's so fascinating to hear the compassion that you exhibited coming from a home that was expressing the opposite from what you say. And
narcissists, the recipe for narcissism, yes, or to be an empath, the recipe is the same.
Yes.
It's the makeup of the being, but narcissists and empaths get made the same way. One chooses, I don't care about anybody else but me, and the other sees how deeply they've been hurt and they don't want to inflict it upon others. Yeah. It's an inner character. It's the spiritual thing.
Yeah, I experienced that growing up. Yeah, and for me,
how so?
Well, I felt my mother was a narcissist personality.
Good chance, then sure.
And growing up in that home and having to not appease her, but she was competing with the child in me.
Yeah.
To be the one who needed more attention than I. And so I felt, I guess, emotionally abandoned from the parts that needed that. And I couldn't get it because my father wasn't strong enough to withstand or stand alone. So he went along with her and they created their own fortress. For me, so for myself, I had to find my way out. It wasn't the streets, like you said, it was my grandmother. So my grandmother lived a block and a half away, and through her, I felt loved, I felt accepted, and I also felt normal.
That's really important for someone to feel.
Yeah, that was key for me because I was very sensitive and empathetic.
You still are.
Absolutely.
Yeah, still are,
Yeah. No, and in fact,
So how did you get past all that? Yes, your grandmother's love, but the wounds already were inflicted.
Well, I think something to say what you said in terms of being compassionate and seeing things a little bit deeper, yes, and looking at children I taught and seeing their own pains and giving them my own insight and wisdom from my personal experience, and with almost like what you said before, knowing what to say, or having said it already in some way, rather than it was almost a download, a wise download that would be a lesson. Yeah. That fit the bill for every child, not one specifically, as not to make one child stand out from the next.
And when you help a child that's struggling, what does that feel like?
Oh, I felt, well, it empowered them, first of all.
Yes, it did.
And it gave me I guess, a sense of reward. That I was able to help myself in some way as well for the parts of myself that were unhealed and that nobody validated. So by validating another child's feelings, it helped me out.
That's why I do what I do.
I know.
All right. That's why I do
Yeah,
it.
I see that as well.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That's right. And it's really, for me, I think it's a really good way to live.
Well, that's why I'm fascinated with your work, because I always had the desire to see beneath the surface and to try to get to the core of what was really going on, as opposed to what was fluffed up and on the exterior. And from
Of yourself, you mean?
of myself,
Oh, yeah.
yes, and then I guess I saw it in other people, but then I was surrounded with the primitive behaviors of the things that I wasn't able to conquer in my own personal home life. And so I guess we take that outside of ourselves and think we can conquer it in relationships or with people, and we wind up getting ourselves involved in the same pattern, realizing we don't have the capabilities to sometimes deal with these types of characters or people.
Sure.
And from that, I guess I chose the people that are right for me, not the people who would create drama for myself, so I wouldn't have to face myself.
You're a healer. I as I said, I did some reading about you. You're a healer. Um, so angels, healers, empaths, people that do spiritual work don't come down from heaven. We fight our way out of hell. You don't start from the top and come down. You start in the bottom and go up. Okay. And that's how we get out of hell.
Yeah. No,
Right.
I've felt the journey. It hasn't been that easy, but it's rewarding when I'm able to, as you said, when you're able to pass the knowledge on to someone else and give them
Yes,
a sense of
absolutely.
power.
That's correct.
And that's
Sure.
my greatest feeling. Um,
Yes.
what I would like to ask you is when a person comes for a reading,
Mhm.
what's the difference between a person wanting to come for a reading and a person not coming for a reading? I mean, when people look into the psychic world in terms of asking for information, what would be the determining factor? Or if there is one?
Well, there are some people that would open their minds to this. There are some people that have come to me over the years. They're backed up against the wall. They have no other option at all. So they come and see me or one of my contemporaries to get help. And that would I suppose be the extreme motivator. There have been times, and you know. It breaks my heart when these things happen. There have been times when people have come to me and sought my help, guidance, and they came from an extremely strict religion that would condemn me, and 150 years ago would have burned me at the stake. So, and I help these people, and they get through it, and then they renounce what I do, or they won't talk to me, or they say, I've gone back to my religion, I can't talk to you anymore. I find that hurtful. Or well, not anymore, but I used to find that hurtful, and so that would be one downside.
Yeah, but that seems to me almost, I'd have to say, from
Hypocritical.
yeah, no, it's funny because I on my path of opening up in terms of
Yeah.
understanding things and speaking to people who are more on a spiritual level. My first step was pretending that I was opening up and interested in what they were saying to me, when I had a sense of apprehension or fear of maybe something that maybe was the unknown or I didn't know. And then it was a wavering back and forth of me battling myself, in essence, as opposed to me battling the person who gave me the information. But I displaced it on that person who told me something that I didn't want to hear or wasn't ready to hear. And then through my own personal give and take of being able to, I guess I would say, sit with myself and hear it and have a conversation, I was then recognizing it wasn't that person outside of me. It was me who was battling myself.
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, when you're doing readings or tuning into people, everything you say and see in someone else, whatever issues they're going through, you have already experienced or had an awareness of it. You've never been able to see anything except for what's right inside your mind already. Okay. Because if it wasn't in your brain, there's nothing to compare it to, and you wouldn't be able to identify it.
Right. That makes, wow.
So everything you see in someone else, you've had an experience like it to be able to explain it, to be able to understand it.
So then why would the person be apprehensive to receive information if they did experience that?
No. The guy doing the reading.
Okay. Okay.
I was telling you.
Yes.
The guy doing the
Yes,
reading,
okay.
right, is the one that has to have had an experience.
Yes, I got you.
All right. And we will always see things from our point of view and our perspective. So what I've worked at over the years is making sure that what I say is quite accurate, but I leave it open-ended so that the person can interpret the information from their perspective.
So yeah, it's funny because if you're doing Akashic record reading and you're accessing the Akashic, from my perspective,
yeah.
I hear information coming to me where I hear a voice speaking to me, but then it becomes, am I the one speaking this? My ego is my ego getting in the way, or is it just my own personal psychic ability working hand in hand?
Well, having an ego is what keeps us alive.
Yeah, and
okay. So, but just going back to when you're getting information, if you were a channeler, okay, so if you channeled, like spirits, spoke through you, the limitation of that connection is the experience that you've had. So when you're channeling, you're the medium. Do you see over my shoulder here, you see a crystal ball?
Yes,
right there. Okay, that's a medium. Now I don't use it as, well, I've had it for like 40 years and I don't do readings with it, but it sat beside me for 40 years. Okay, so that's a medium. And the information comes through that if it was, and the only information that could come through that was information that could make it through that medium. So you're the medium. So the limitation is your life experience. If there's nothing in your brain to compare with what what's being channeled, they won't be able to use your body, your mind, your voice, right, because there's no experience or nothing to compare it to. That's why most of us that do this work have this huge life experience, right? Because that's also part of the job. So you have to be beat up as a kid, right? Right? Got to fight your way out of hell. Then you also have to have a broad life experience to be really good. You can be really accurate with in a really quiet, restricted environment, but the limitation of the information is deeply restricted.
So in essence, you create more receptors.
Well, I don't necessarily think I work with spirits. I've just always done it. Yeah. A lot of people would use spirits or whatever. I'm simply the medium then, and I don't recognize any other information, and I have to have the experience of something similar before I can talk about it. That's just,
yeah, I understand.
Okay.
How does a psychic, in terms of giving information about the future, do we have free will?
Absolutely.
To alter our
yes,
future?
We do.
Okay, maybe you could
explain. Yes, we do. Okay. Yes, I can. Okay. what can be seen can be changed. So when I do a reading for someone, and I say such and such can happen, and I usually, most of the time, say the possibility of this happening is really high, rather than this will happen, because that implies it can't be changed. So I give that. See that's what I meant by open-ended. So I'll say, the probabilities of this really high, that this is going to occur. If I told you that on Saturday afternoon at 4 o'clock, you're going to be in the downtown part of the place that you live. You'll be walking across the main street. The light's going to be green, but you're going to get run over by a car going the wrong way. You're not going to die, but you're going to get beat all to hell. So you find yourself downtown on that day, and it's 5 to 4, and you go, oh shit, Milne said, if I walk across the street, I'm going to get run over. Oh, well, I'm not going to walk across the street. All right, so you can change what's been said, because you know about it. If it's destined, it can't be seen. So I'll give you an example. You an example of that. These are these are examples from time over the crystal ball, as it were. I don't use a medium. I just jokingly say over, working over the crystal ball. This happened right after the Calgary Winter Olympics. So that was in the 1980s.
88, I think, right? Maybe 88.
Something like that. Yeah. It was something like that, around that time. Around that time. So anyway, this woman came to me for a reading. It was a couple of days after the events, the games, and she was a TV producer for CTV in the sports department, and she was just come back from the Winter Olympics, and she rode her bicycle to my place to get her reading. So I do this really fabulous reading for her. Now, I can't remember what she looks like, but I'll never forget her. Anyway, I did this reading for her. It was just great. All these wonderful things, and she was going to get married, and, and yada, yada. And it just went on and on. It was just fabulous. Okay, so I give her a reading, take the money. The very next night, on the late night news. So we have our national news on at 11 o'clock at night. So our star broadcasters come on then. So it was Lloyd Robertson on the CTV. I'm watching Lloyd Robertson, and all of a sudden he does an obituary, and they show the picture. It was the woman I did a reading for the day before. When she left my place, she got on her bike, started riding, and got hit by a trolley car. We have trolley cars in Toronto. She got hit by a streetcar and got killed. How did that happen? I thought, how could I have missed that? If I'm so bloody good, how could I do a reading for somebody and they get killed an hour later or 2 hours after I miss it? I thought about that for a long time. And then I thought, I did a lot of thinking. I thought, destiny cannot be changed. So if something's destined, you can't see it. And that's about the only way I've been able to live with it.
Wow. So when you're in a position like that and you have to do your next reading, what's the feelings that go into it? Was there a different approach or a different feeling or a feeling of questioning things?
The only time that ever happened, it was awful. There was a period, I was about 31, 32 years old. And I don't know, I just stopped believing in what I do. I just lost the faith. And I remember when I was doing readings back in those days, being able to see things like on, with like I talked about the TV screens, that's a plus. But let me tell you something, it can be negative when it goes negative. So I'd be doing a reading for somebody and I'd be talking to them about their most personal things in their life. And then there would be a voice saying, liar, cheater, fake, fraud. Boy, that was awful. That was really a struggle. But I did it. And I struggled. And it's like any losing streak. It's like any losing streak. Right. And it's time to regroup, reassess life. Now during that time, I also had ballooned up to, like, I'm only about 5'6", 5'7", and I had ballooned up to, like around 300. And I was chain smoking cigarettes, a couple of packs a day, and it was all during that time. And it was during that time. So I did get burned out. And then it was during that time that I made a switch. And, over that year, I lost, about 140 pounds, or a year and a half, I lost about 140 pounds. And I stopped smoking cigarettes, and it changed my life. And while I was doing that, I got the faith back again.
It's interesting because I
Yep.
relate to that in some way.
Sure.
Either the personal anger that I
that one. Yeah.
personal anger
Yeah.
threw me off course of having that connection. And then again, I was questioning my connection to spirit, thinking when I surrounded myself with other people and maybe becoming not more social, but being around people who are non-believers in this type of work, in order to maybe not fit in, but to be in the company of people who are not fully invested in this type of work. When you step out of it, then you come back to yourself almost like a springboard. And I was questioning and not getting the clarity that I wanted. And I was becoming angry and disillusioned with, I think, some of the things that you just said. I became angry. And I believe over the last 2 years, because of all the distractions and all the stuff that's going on, it's caused a lot of upset for myself.
Has it?
Yeah, it caused me a lot of anger, but it was actually in one way good because it brought up conflicts on a personal level,
Sure.
which made me look into them.
Adam, often the depth of our anger is actually the depth of our hurt. So we often, when we're angry, or actually when we get hurt, often what we do is we surround that injury, that hurt, with anger. And we humans are only capable of feeling one emotion at a time. And when we're feeling angry, we don't feel hurt. Right. So what happens is that when we're deeply hurt, we mask that hurt in anger. We don't deal with the hurt. Then what happens is the hurt starts to ferment and it starts to get bigger and bigger. And we need to have more anger to be able to push it down.
I feel that now. Wow.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's right. So because we don't want to feel the hurt.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So then the anger gets greater, and just as the hurt festers. When we stop concentrating on the anger and get in touch with the pain, it starts to heal. When I'm working with somebody who's been, say they've gone through a really bad relationship and they're angry as hell, one of the things that I convince them to do is say, stop being mad, just push that out of the way, admit how deeply you're hurt, and face that, heal that, and let that put light on that, put sunshine on that energy. And then I also point out the fear that you're having trouble looking at. When we remember a pain from the past, it's never as bad as it was when it was inflicted upon us. So I remember when I played hockey one time, a guy elbowed me in the face and put my nose over there. Well, I remember going to the doctor, and I remember him putting the prongs up my nose and pushing the bone back. Holy, did that ever hurt? Now, when I think about it, I go, wow, that hurt, but I don't feel it. I remember it hurt.
Okay.
So that means that now, and the next one is, you are living proof, anyone watching us or listening to, are living proof that no matter what's happened to you, you've survived it. That's absolutely, because if you didn't, you wouldn't be here.
Right.
All right. So recognizing that you've already experienced it and survived it, and remembering it is never as painful as what you've already survived, then the healing can begin.
Well, this year has been, I've opened that pathway.
I'm so glad to hear.
Yeah, I've opened that pathway because we've had no
You're
choice.
a good man, Adam. You're a good human being.
Thank you. There's no other way. It's either to go inward and explore, or to explode, and and
well,
be
you
a
see,
victim.
that's the other thing. There's always a way. There's always, so when you have one way of doing something, you actually have three.
Explain.
Okay, so draw a line, right? You can't have a one-sided line. Agreed? All right, so if we have one way of doing something, and in the universe, it consists of things that are positive and negative. And what we are is equally positive and negative. So you can't have positive without negative. You can't have negative without positive. So when we're in a situation and we don't know what to do, and then we follow it the way we've always handled it. We always, because unconsciously we have a way of handling problems or types of problems. All right, so we have one way of doing something. When we have one way of doing something, we then have the exact opposite way of doing it. Right? Because you can't have one way of doing something. Okay, so we have the exact opposite.
The extreme.
Right, one extreme to the other. Okay. And now the way we've always handled a problem may not be the most effective, right, but it always got us through the problem. All right, so that's successful. So we have one way, then we have equally the opposite, and maybe it'll be successful, but it might not be the most effective. So when we have this way and that way, when you have two sides, there has to be a middle. So you've got this way and that way, and then somewhere in between. But somewhere in between doesn't have to be in the middle. Somewhere in between could be there or there. Oh, okay. So now you've got three ways of doing things, except somewhere in between isn't necessarily in the middle. It can be over here or over here. So that would mean that you've got three ways, but there could be six, because you've got this way and this way and this way. And you go from, I don't know what to do, to I've always done it this way, to as many options as you can open your mind to. Just like that, by opening your mind, just like that. And if it were that easy, I'd go, here you go, zoop, you're healed.
Yeah, no, I understand.
But that's the concept. That's how right?
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. You spoke about helping a coma patient.
Yes.
Maybe you can elaborate.
Yeah. I've been, as psychic for a long time, and I have some very impressive clients. I have normal, everyday people. I have some people that are poor, general, cross section of society. one client, I can tell you her name because she wrote the book and her name's on the book, and her name is Stephanie Strathdee. And Stephanie came to me for a reading about 30 years ago. She had just graduated with her PhD in epidemiology from the University of Toronto, U of T. And she came to me for a reading about 30 years ago. And I'd done this reading, and she'd been coming back to me for years. And then Stephanie got married, and it was for the second time. But let me just tell you, Stephanie has a PhD in epidemiology. She is a professor of epidemiology at the University of Southern California and associate dean of the Department of Epidemiology. You know, she's a heavyweight, and she is a leading expert in AIDS research, and she's won awards. Like, this is like a top level person. Her husband, Tom, also has a PhD, but he has his PhD in experimental psychology, and he has a PhD in psychiatry. He also is a professor at the same university, and he's also associate dean of his department. There's a difference in age than Tom and Stephanie. And Tom is a great big guy, like 6'5", and he's like an Indiana Jones kind of, you know, like macho kind of guy. Anyway, and he's 5 years older than me, so he'd be in his late 70s now. So they go away on one of their many dream vacations, and they go to Egypt. A year before, I had done a reading for Tom, and I warned him. And I said to him, well, see, I give bad news in a very different way than some of my contemporaries. What I do is I look into the future and I tell them the positive results of the shit that's going to happen to them. But I don't tell them that stuff yet. I just tell them the positive results and how great it's going to be and yada, yada. Then I come back to the present, I talk a little bit and I drop a hint. And then I leave it, talk about other stuff, then talk about this great time in the future. Then I come back and expand it until by the time I'm finished the reading, they know something's going to happen. They're prepared for it and they know they're going to get through it. That's how I do it. And I did that with Tom. And I said, you know, Tom, and by the way, he also ballooned up. He didn't get as fat as me because he's 6'5" and I was, you know, 5'6", you know, so I was carrying the 300, you know, I was more like roly-poly man than he was, but he was a big guy. He was well over 3 and change. Anyway, I had told him that he was going to, first I said to him, at such and such a time, you're going to be more than 150 pounds less in weight. You're going to lose more than 150 pounds. And then, you know, then I came back and started talking and then eventually it got to, there's a sickness coming and you're going to be so sick, you cannot get sicker and continue to live, but you will live and you will lose more than 150 pounds. Then I said, I'm seeing your destiny is that you're going to be losing 150 pounds. You can get sick and lose 150 pounds, or you can choose to listen to what I've said. It scares the hell out of you. You lose the 150 on your own and you miss the illness. Wow. And then I said to him, Tom, the choice is yours. You can do it the easy way or you can do it the hard way. And I was that direct. So like a year later or so, they go away on this vacation in Egypt. Tom had problems in his stomach anyway. And I told him where the problems were too. And he had problems in his pancreas in and around that area. They go away to Egypt. They go in a pyramid. Tom isn't well anyway. He gets really sick in the pyramid, like he's really sick. They carry him out. They get back to the hotel. The doctor comes and they say, this man's very sick. And they ship him to the emergency ward in this downtown Egyptian hospital. where he catches the most potent supervirus on the planet. It was 100% antibiotic resistant. That means if you get it, you die. That's what it means. And Tom got it. And there was no cure. Tom was in a coma. He was medevaced from Egypt, and Stephanie, they were medevaced to a special clinic in Germany. And Tom was in a coma, and he was in a completely in a everybody around him wearing hazmat suits, and he was in total isolation. In that time, this brilliant woman, Stephanie, was trying to figure out what could she do. And I said to her, you can find a cure for this. But there was no cure. You can find a cure for this. And oh, incidentally, how I found out about this problem was, and it was during Christmas. And I was feeling sick at Christmas. I heard my Skype phone ring, and I answered it. And when I saw it was Stephanie, I answered it, and I said, what took you so long? I've been waiting for you. And that actually was true. I'd been waiting to hear from her because I knew something was happening. So she decided, I told her that she had the awareness, the experience, the knowledge, everything, that she could find a cure for this. And she decided that she was going to find a cure. And she did. And it wasn't just because she had a psychic. It's that I was a consultant for her. I spoke with her every single day. And I had created a mental link with Tom. And I knew what he was going through 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I knew what was going on in his mind, even though he was in Germany and then ultimately back in California. And I knew when he was in trouble. I knew when he was letting go. I knew when his vital signs were getting weak. I knew when he was okay. And I knew it. And I had meetings with Stephanie every day, giving her reports on Tom and also what else was going on. Stephanie had the contact. She set up a group of scientists around the world that started working on this problem. Tom was in the coma for 8 months. He went through 7 times of septic shock. And as he was just barely living, like he was less than 10 hours away from death, 12, okay, from death. He was injected with the cure that Stephanie had found.
Wow.
And he'd been in a coma. This guy was a skeleton, He had been in a coma, and the doctors weren't sure if they gave it to him, would he live through it? So they thought we were going to give him a little bit, and because we don't want to be the one to kill this guy. So they gave him a little bit, and he didn't die. So that, okay, they gave him a little bit more and a little bit more, and this happened throughout the night. The next morning, he'd been getting injections of this substance every couple of hours throughout the whole night. When Stephanie visited him at the hospital, he woke up from his coma that he had been in for 8 months, and he opened his eyes and he looked at her, and they saw each other. That only went on for a short time, and then he closed his eyes and he went to sleep. He never went into a coma again. And through this therapy, it brought him back and saved his life. I helped her find it. But I'm not the main event. I'm not the main star. There were geniuses around the world that worked on this. But there were 3 different times. This psychic, now, there are a lot of psychics on the planet that could have done what I did. I just was lucky enough to get the call. It would, my number came up, do you want the job? Yes. Okay. It was one of those. There's a lot of people on the planet that could do it. But I got the call. I was privileged in that way. So had a psychic, not just me, had a psychic not been on the job, Tom would have died. Because there was on 3 different occasions. There's one time where early into his time in Egypt or in Germany, the way I knew he was okay is I visualized a candle flame, a candle and a candle light on. And when the light was strong, I knew the flame was strong. I knew he was okay, he wasn't going to die in that moment. When the candle started to flicker, I knew some shit was happening.
Wow.
Okay,
wow.
that's and I just created that,
Imagery.
that wasn't, I just created that imagery to sense the energy. And this one day I saw the flame. It looked like it was going out. Tom was cold. He didn't know where he was. He was unconscious, but he could hear the voices of the medical staff around him. He didn't understand it. He was sick, hallucinating, and he was letting go. And he was all alone. He couldn't sense Stephanie. He couldn't sense his children. Yeah. And I thought he was going to die. And I said to Stephanie, Tom needs to see his daughters. Yesterday would have been a great day. Today's a good day. Tomorrow's not so good. If you wait longer, don't bother. And I was that direct and to the point. If you wait longer, just don't bother.
Wow.
He was in Germany and Tom's children were in California. That night, they arrived in Germany and were taken to their father. And they got hazmat suits on. And now I'm telling you this because this is the story, this part of the story I can tell you was told to me.
Right.
The girls arrived and they were there, but I saw the flame go from flickering to being really strong, and I knew something had happened. And I found out that the girls arrived. In the book, The Perfect Predator, that Stephanie has written, and it was, they had like $250,000 royalty advance for the book. So Stephanie, Tom survived, and if one of our people hadn't been involved, he wouldn't have made it. And and there were 2 other events that happened that Tom would have died. And in the book, Tom writes about the hallucinations that he was having, and he talks about that time of letting go and then the girls arriving.
Wow, and that was in line with you seeing the flickering candle in terms of the intensity.
It was right at the same time period.
That's so interesting.
I knew what was going on with Tom. Now, I'm not a doctor, so I couldn't identify, but I knew if there was something going wrong. I knew there was something wrong with his vital signs. I knew that there was something wrong with, there's something called a pseudocyst around his pancreas. I don't know what that meant, but I just knew the word for it. But there was something there. I didn't fully understand it, so I would see it as it looks really, really sick and gray, and it looks like it's dying, or I'd see things like that. And it got that I would be a couple of days ahead of what the doctors were seeing because I was tuned into the energy. The other thing, and this one is also in the book, the other thing about that is that I use a lot of colloquialisms and, kind of cool expressions. And I would use some slang when I'd be describing something. After a while, the doctors would use the same expressions.
Wow.
Yeah, right. They would repeat the same expression, when describing something to Stephanie.
Wow.
Yeah.
You were an influencer. Could be.
I do.
So inspiring.
Thank
yeah,
you.
I mean, I've read many books with Eben Alexander and his near-death experience and the connections he had, but to have this connection with someone on this.
I've done it several times.
Yeah.
That Tom was the biggest, loudest one.
Right, right.
You know, when I was connected with him for almost a year and I lived, it had a big effect on my body. I was, it really had a profound effect on me physically. So the year after, like when he came out of the coma and you know, everybody knew he was going to live, and I wasn't on the job anymore. About a month after, I was carrying I had this little rescue dog. She was like 16 years old and she couldn't walk. And I was carrying her down the back stairs and I slipped and fell backwards and I broke 4 ribs. And then when they healed, like a couple of weeks after, you know, like after like 3 months or something, I was chasing another dog and I tripped and fell and broke my shoulder. And then another month after that, just before Christmas, I woke up in the night to pee and I was walking down the hall, tripped over, I don't know, a toothpick or something, bam, head first on the floor, smashed my face on the floor and had this great big swollen and a minor concussion, big black eye. And then a few months after that, I got rear-ended in an accident on a major highway. And I had those 4 accidents and they happened all within a period of a year. And then in that year, my PTSD episodes went crazy. And I spent a lot of time all freaked out. And it was one of the worst times of my life for my PTSD. Right. And Tom, Stephanie, and I were on this radio show together talking about the experience. And it was the first time we actually, the 3 of us, got down and talked about what we all did together. They talked about the scientific part, but the 3 of us never had a connection. We talked about it on the radio. And they mentioned, or Stephanie started mentioning about the injuries that Tom went through and the things that he experienced, as well as the PTSD. And I went, oh my God, that's what happened to me. Those physical things, it took a toll on my body.
Wow.
It also took a lot of toll on my energy too, because to a degree, you know, he survived by the energy I was giving him. I've done that with several people over my lifetime. It's not like the first time. And it hasn't been the last. I worked with a woman that had 4th stage cancer for 14 months, all the way through to the completion of her life.
So that's a very inspiring story, and it shows the power of the mind and the power of intention, along with your connection to the energy that you were able to gather to.
In that moment, had a psychic not been involved, Tom wouldn't have made it. Yeah. And like I said, there are a lot of people on the planet that could have done the job. I just got the call. I was in, it's like being a car salesman on the car lot, right? I got the next one.
Yeah.
That's what happened,
Yeah, but it's inspiring. I'd like to leave you with this question in terms of maybe you can give a little insight into where we're headed in terms of, if you have any insight into.
This time next year, we're going to be recovering from this nightmare we're living through right now. There are no nuclear weapons flying over North America. Either way, there are no nuclear weapons going from Russia to Europe, or either way. What's going to happen is that, they say, like the evil empire, it's going to implode. It's getting very close to imploding. There is a very good chance that President Putin will be, I don't know, have a bad meal or something and not wake up the next morning.
Yeah.
It's going to come down to that. The Russian people will suffer almost as badly as the Ukrainian. The only difference between the Russians and the Ukrainians is that the Ukrainians had their home blown off the map. The Russians will not have had that. But other than that, they're going to be about equal in terms of the devastation on the planet. The other thing that also is going to happen is very much like what happened to the Germans in the First World War, when the Allies came and said, "Okay, you did this, Charlie, and you're paying for it," and that's going to be inflicted upon the Russians too.
Well, we're all in a state of chaos, and as long as we have, I find that we have the autonomy and the freedom as humans to be able to express our desires, our free choice, and I'm satisfied.
So, Adam, just one more thing about that. While I look into the future and doing readings for people, my focus in life is the person in front of me. And so I'm not much focused on world events. What I'm focused on is feeding the hungry person in front of me. I can't solve world hunger, but I can feed that person, right? I can help the person up that's in front of me. I can't build the bridge in Ukraine. So my focus, my interest is, what I can solve right away, right in front of me. That's what I'm interested in.
Well, on that note, then, I'd like to thank you very much for your inspiring information, your inspiring insight, and your personal struggle and journey that was enlightening, not only to your development, but also to the people that you associate with. And no struggle goes unnoticed, I guess, as long as it's able to be turned into something positive and to focus and to help someone else out with their own personal struggle. So I admire you for that, and I'm inspired by you.
Thank you. I'm inspired by you too.
Thank you.
You faced down your demons.
I certainly have.
And won.
And more than one.
Absolutely. That's why I'm inspired, sir.
Thank you.